Hey guys, and welcome to an Aspie's point of view where I give you my opinion on stuff. So today I'm going to tell the long-awaited story of how I got my autism diagnosis. I referred to it a little bit in my first video, Who Am I? But basically I was not diagnosed until adulthood. I went all through growing up being told I had generalized anxiety disorder, and I had OCD, and I had chronic depression, and I was bipolar, and anything under the sun. I saw tons of different therapists, doctors, and nobody ever even mentioned autism. And I went to college for speech-language pathology. I wanted to be a speech therapist, help people to acquire speech or to better utilize their speech. I wanted to work with kids with autism, actually. And it was my junior year, and one of my classes, they were talking about sarcasm. And earlier in the semester, I had an issue in the class because we were talking about a social script for making friends, and I didn't quite know what that script would be. But I didn't really think anything of it. I just, said I'm kind of a loner. That's the way my life is. But when the sarcasm unit came about, I actually went to my professor and I said, please tell me that this won't be on the test, because while I can define sarcasm, I can't detect sarcasm. And she looked at me and just simple as day said, well, of course you can't, because of your autism. And I stopped dead in my tracks. And I said, I don't have autism. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, I just assumed. I was registered with the Office of Disabilities. I was getting accommodations for my generalized anxiety disorder, for my OCD, etc. But she thought that all of my accommodations were for autism, apparently. Well, I ran from my classroom down to the Saltzman Center at the university that I went to. The Saltzman Center was the therapy clinic, and begged to see my counselor, begged to see her. And I was crying, and I said, why didn't you tell me I had autism? And she said, I don't think you do. And I said, oh, okay. And I calmed down, went about the rest of my junior year, the rest of my senior year, got a job right out of school, started working. Then it came up in the workplace that I behaved a little bit like our kids. And finally, I just point blank asked my manager, I said, do you think I have autism? And she said, yes, I do. And I said, is that going to be a problem? And she said, I don't know. And I should have heard warning bells at that point, but I didn't. I did ask my parents to take me to get tested. So I went to a developmental psychologist, a neuropsychologist, I believe. It was a diagnosing center. And basically, I went through a couple of days of grueling testing, things that I could never do before and still can't do to this day, and things that I thought I could do really well and then found that I could not. And after the testing, which ended up coinciding with a death of a very close family member, and I was told I could reschedule my testing, but at that point I just wanted to know. After the testing, they, said I did have Asperger's, and it was the biggest relief and the biggest anger I think I've ever felt. Let me explain. I finally knew why everything in my life had happened. And so that to me was a relief. But at the same time, I was so angry that nobody had figured it out before. When I was 5 years old, I went to a diagnostician who was supposed to do the similar things that they did in that office that day. He played the squiggle game with me. When I refused to draw off of his squiggle, he said I was an insolent child and there was nothing wrong with me except that I didn't want to follow the rules. I was a goody two-shoes. I always followed the rules. I just couldn't draw a drawing off of his drawing. It didn't make sense in my head. And that is autism. But he just assumed that I was insolent. And from then I went to doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor, and no one ever noticed. And that made me mad. That my whole life at that point was, in my eyes, tainted. If I had gotten the help earlier, would my life be different? And that's a question that I do always ask myself. But to make a long story short, eventually ended up leaving the job that I was at because I felt like they didn't want me there. Came to Texas, got a new job doing the same thing, doing speech therapy, and my autism caused a problem there too. And so the moral of my autism story, I guess, is that if I had been diagnosed earlier, I probably would have picked a different career path, and I would probably be doing what I set out to do instead of working 3 jobs just trying to stay afloat. But I don't know if I would have the same character, the same personality, the same determination as I do. So I can't change what happened in the past. I can only accept my autism story and move on from there. So I hope you found this to be informative or helpful in some way, shape, or form. If you have any questions about my autism story, the diagnosing process, if you're in the process of going through it yourself or just went through it and you need to talk, use that comment section down below. I will answer comments. So thank you very much for watching. Until next time, this has been an Aspie's Point of View. Good night.